Hey everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. On Wednesdays, we like to get into the psychology of serial killers, and I just nickname it Serial Killer Wednesdays. You might notice I am in a different setting today. I am currently pet sitting, and this is just my job. So today we are going to be focusing on Arlene Wuornos, and I have my little handy book of stories, just my notes. Okay, so first off, I like to start with the crimes that were committed by the serial killers. So between 1989 and 1990, the bodies of 7 men were found. The victims had been robbed before they were killed. They were killed by shooting and having their cars stolen. They weren't all found at the same time. I know how that might have sounded. They were found like individually at different times. The first victim was Richard Mallory, who was 51 years old. He was a shop owner and he picked up Arlene, but as a prostitute. So Arlene was a working prostitute at the time. His body was discovered several miles away from where his car was, and he was shot numerous times in the chest. The second victim was David Spears. He was found naked. He was 43, a construction worker, and he was found June the 1st, 1990. So I think there was quite a bit of a gap. So I think the first victim was found kind of mid to late 1989, and then there was like a gap of 8 months-ish, and then David Spears was found. He was shot 6 times in his torso. The third victim was Charles... I can't pronounce his last name, I'm not even going to try. And he was found just a few days after David Spears, and he was around 40. So the murders must have happened within kind of like the same time frame, so within maybe a couple of days, couple of weeks of each other. He was a rodeo worker, and he was shot 9 times in the chest and the stomach. The fourth victim was Troy Brures. He was a salesman, and he had actually been reported missing by his family. And then I think it was, I want to say like 5 days later, I think, that his body was actually found on August the 4th, 1990. When the coroners brought him in, because by this time his body has kind of, it wasn't in good condition. I couldn't think of the word there. And the cause of death was determined to be 2 gunshot wounds to his torso. The fifth victim was Charles Humphreys. He was a retired police chief, and he was found dead September 12th, 1990. So again, there was like kind of a gap of a couple of months between these victims. He was fully clothed, and he had multiple shot wounds to both his head and his torso. Sixth victim, Peter Sims. He had left Florida, and I guess he was on his way to New Jersey, and his body was actually never found. But a witness did describe seeing 2 women of Arlene's description and her partner at the time near his car. The last victim was Walter Antonio, who was 62, and his body was found partially naked. On November 19th, 1990, he was shot 4 times in the back and the head, and his car was found 5 days later. The killer turned out to be Arlene Wuornos. In the 1980s, she had moved to Florida to work as a prostitute. So now we're just going to cover Arlene and what her childhood was like, to kind of give you a picture of how these events could have led up to Arlene committing these crimes. She was consistently in trouble with the police for prostitution, forgery, assault, and illegal possession of firearms. So she was known to police. In 1986, she met her partner, Tyria Moore, but they broke up just before Arlene's arrest. Together they would sell stolen items which had come from the victims, and within a Florida pawn shop. And during investigations, police actually discovered items that belonged to some of the victims. And they actually found a receipt with Wuornos' fingerprint on it. So they'd obviously scanned it, and because she was known to the police, they had obviously found it was her fingerprint. Police also traced more stolen items to Arlene from her first victim. His vehicle was found in a warehouse unit. and they were able to open it with a key taken from Arlene at the time of her arrest. And it was obviously rented under an alias. Wuornos, Arlene's partner, actually suspected Arlene of committing these crimes, and that's said to be why she left. But there are also rumours that she was kind of in on it and that she actually knew more than she was letting on. And then once Arlene was arrested, the police used Tyria, Arlene's girlfriend, to gain a confession from Arlene. So now we go into the childhood. So Arlene was born to teen parents. Her father was unfortunately in and out of mental health hospitals. It was said he did have very bad mental health. And then after that, he was actually in prison for kidnap and sexual assault of a minor, I believe. And it was at this time that he unfortunately committed suicide. She was then adopted by her grandparents because our mother couldn't bring her and her brother up, so they were then given to the grandparents. And it said that they experienced physical and verbal abuse. She had trouble in high school doing her exams, and when she was tested, she actually had a low IQ of 81. So obviously she did struggle with that. She might have been bullied for it, but it didn't actually say when I looked into it. At 14, she was raped by her grandfather's friend and unfortunately got pregnant. Her grandfather, I believe, actually blamed her, and she was then sent away and forced to give her child up for adoption because at the time she was only 14. At 15, she dropped out of high school, and at that time it was then that she began prostituting herself. She did have alcohol and drug addiction, and when her brother was 21, he unfortunately died of cancer, I believe. And it was shortly after that that her grandfather committed suicide. Whether that's linked to the brother dying, I'm not entirely sure, but it could be. So at the time that Arlene was going through her trial, a defense psychologist concluded that Arlene suffered from bipolar disorder at the time of crime. Now, this isn't to say that everyone with BPD will go on to commit these crimes, not at all. This is just kind of a way as a possible explanation due to Arlene's childhood, due to her low IQ, maybe the mental stress that she went through, having been physically abused by her grandparents, being raped at the age of 14. This all comes into it in possible explanations on why she did what she did. I actually also believe that she did have possible PTSD as well, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So this basically comes about when a traumatic event has happened in someone's life and they suffer mentally and psychologically because of this event, and it can come out in all different ways. She also exhibited evidence of brain damage due to the abuse throughout her childhood. So again, that could be why her IQ was so low, because of certain brain damage and damage to certain areas in the brain. They kind of remove the feeling and emotions of like guilt, the feeling of consequence, and it makes them very hard to relate to these type of people with this damage. It was also said that at the time that Arlene had met these men, and I think some of them were looking for a prostitute, that she could have maybe suffered some sort of PTSD attack or panic attack, and that led her into shooting her victims. This was just one of the defense tactics that the defense team had come up with, and it is entirely possible that this could have happened. On October 9th, 2002, Arlene Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. This case then actually highlighted issues within the US penal system, and one of those was to do with the mental health and the death penalty. Now, I am in no way suggesting that because someone has psychological or mental illnesses and they commit a crime that they shouldn't have consequences. Of course, they should have consequences, but I also believe in treating the issue as well. So, in the case of Arlene Wuornos, if you have watched any documentaries with her, she seemed like a very, I don't want to say unhinged, but that's probably the easiest way to describe it, is she seemed like a very unhinged individual. And it just seemed that no one ever even attempted to help her. And I feel like she maybe would have been better at a mental health facility for the remainder of her days. You know, she wouldn't be an issue to society. She would have got the help that she needed. It would still kind of be a punishment, but again, it's also, we also like to concentrate on the reform of people who have done wrong. And I just found that quite interesting. I've always found Arlene Wuornos quite an interesting person to focus on, especially psychologically. So that was just a short one today. It was actually shorter than I thought it was going to be, maybe just because I talk quick. But thank you for tuning in. And if this is the kind of content you like, definitely hit that subscribe button. And the next time I will see you is Saturday. Bye.